I can't think of a better way to represent Wicked for Good than what I'm going through right now. I got all dressed up. I feel like a child and an adult at the same time because I'm so happy with the outfit I put together, but I feel silly wearing it because I'm about to tell you how sad, truly sad and heartbreaking this movie is. It's just, we all want to play dress up, but real life so often gets in the way of our fantasies. And I respect the heck out of this movie for delivering such an honest message. It's like that clown gif, when you're like, oh, I'm going to tell someone something stupid or the joke's on me. And I think that this movie intentionally captures that. To be a little more positive, just last night, I saw a wonderful video on Twitter of one of the actresses who portrays Glinda at Universal Studios theme park. And it gave me such joy to see that Glinda would live on beyond this movie and beyond Ariana Grande's performance. I didn't think that I would cry. Okay. To go beyond Ariana Grande's performance and to see the character transcend the movie and the original Broadway musical to join the pop culture pantheon. I love that. It just made me feel so nice. I was caught up. This movie makes me feel a lot of things. And as many of you know, I don't like to feel things. And I'm a swirl of emotion. All right, so I think I said that in such a stupid way. I think Cynthia Erivo's performance is more grounded and real, and Ariana Grande's is more packaged. They brilliantly, perfectly fit their characters. But I think that's why I've seen a lot of Elphaba fans go, what about Cynthia Erivo? Well, Glinda, I think, gets more attention because Glinda, just like the character herself would want to be, she's a product. And Grande and director Jon Chu and screenwriters Holzman and Fox and costume designer Paul Tazewell have created that perfectly. And that's why at the end of the day, I think that Ariana Grande's Glinda is not only getting a little bit more attention, but why I think she'll be the one to win the Oscar. I think Erivo will be nominated, but I think that Ariana Grande will probably win. I also think, like Batman versus Superman, Iron Man versus Captain America, Han Solo versus Luke Skywalker, you're either one or the other. You identify with one group. You're an Elphaba or a Glinda. And with the story, I wasn't sure after seeing the first film. I was like, sometimes I think I might be an Elphaba. But after this film, the story was complete. I really found myself identifying with Glinda, and not always in a fun way. And I think it's funny that she fits very much so actually with Bruce Wayne, Tony Stark, and Han Solo. That puts a smile on my face, which desperately needs one because the movie is so sad. So I'm curious if you're an Elphaba or a Glinda, and without spoilers, I'd love to kind of hear how you feel about that. But I'll tell you something else. Speaking of complicated feelings, to see them fight here, that was one of the saddest things I've ever seen. We'll talk about it more in the spoiler review. I don't want to give away the context or why it in particular made me sad. But it haunted me to my very core when I saw them do it. I honestly, in my head, said, oh no, don't do that. And it was just very, very powerful. I would say that Wicked for Good is a movie about fascism and feminism. What a combo. I mean, it fits fascism and feminism. It's got that alliteration. But let's discuss. I hope you'll subscribe because we're going to be talking about Wicked for Good all week long. We've got my spoiler review. We'll be keeping an eye on the box office from Thursday to the whole weekend when we see what that is. We're going to talk about the Rotten Tomatoes score later today. So much going on. So be sure to hit that subscribe button and also the bell for notifications so you'll never miss a video or a live stream. And the coverage will be divided up between those two types of content. So yeah, fascism and feminism. That's truly what I think this movie is about. And I think the anti-fascism message is very important and powerful. And sadly, once again, timely. But it's the sobering look at feminism, the yin to Barbie's yang, that I think truly elevates this film, at least to me. I mean, obviously, everybody will have a different takeaway. It's art. You see what you see. But the commentary on feminism I thought was amazing. I wasn't prepared for how sad this movie was going to be. I mean, the trailers kind of was like, this is the sad half of the story, but I was like, even sadder than anticipated. And so I'm curious to see how other people who aren't familiar with the Broadway musical will react. It's jarring. And I have to say that when I saw Wicked for Good, as soon as the movie was over, I was like, nah, I like the first one better. However, I'm glad I didn't review the movie right away, because as I've mulled it over the past few days, thinking what I was going to say about it, I kind of, I think the message is, well, it's not as fun a movie to watch. I think that what it has to say, particularly about feminism, is so powerful and unique. And we haven't really seen this kind of commentary about feminism before in the pop culture space, that I wouldn't say I like the film more, but it intrigues me more. And I would like to see it again. I'm not sure if it's something I'd see again in theaters. I don't know. It's so sad. And on that note, at first I was like, I don't know if little kids, this movie is really for them. But again, the more I think about it, the more I think that not only is it okay for kids like dark stuff. I liked dark stuff when I was growing up. But maybe it's something they should see. This is a message they should hear and be exposed to. Now, what about this idea of splitting it into two parts? At first, when you think about it from a business perspective, you're like, twice the money, baby. All the time in the world to tell this story. But something felt off by splitting it this way. So I schooled myself, I gave myself a crash course in musical theater. And so I have some thoughts on this, and I'll be curious to hear the feedback for those of you who really know your musical theater. These are the Taylor Swift freckles, by the way, and that touching social media post from the creator who cried that, she'd been working so hard to get her business going, and because of Taylor Swift, they'd really taken off. I hadn't been prepared for how kind of cute they are. They're great. I recommend them. They're a lot of fun. Don't worry, I have a totally different look. Well, it's a parallel look, but I have a different look planned for the spoiler review. It is fun to dress up until reality smacks you in the face. All right, so I was like, why does this feel so weird that they divided this movie into two parts now that I've seen it? And I was like, well, what if you took The Little Mermaid, right, and you split it into two films and you ended the first movie after Poor Unfortunate Souls? Because, on paper, that makes sense. You're like, she's going to go to land. She's got legs now. See you with the second movie. But then you're like, but you don't have enough songs for the second half. All the really big, famous ones are in the Act 1. And we're also I wanted to get something that was a proper musical, because The Little Mermaid was written for the screen, but Sound of Music, the original musical, right? So what if they broke that into two films and they ended it at Act 1, leaving, and if that would mean that only Edelweiss was still the full-on new song for the second half, the second film. The Sound of Music, by the way, also about fascism. All these movies and the great powerful things about fascism, yet we still have to keep learning the damn lesson. All right, so I'm not a big musical theater fan, as I said, but I did a crash course on it. And it seems to me that Act 2s have a lot of reprises of Act 1 songs, a lot of callbacks, basically. And so I can see why, with the Broadway musical being split in two here, that Stephen Schwartz was like, we need two new songs to balance things out, because it's a whole lot of reprises. And because Wicked for Good is just Act 2 with all those reprises, it feels to me slightly adrift, and sometimes more like a montage or a dream, or perhaps more accurately a nightmare, considering how dark it is, than a structured story. I also think, on that note, that while I understand why Jon M. Chu, the director, chose not to really show Dorothy, you see her from behind or you see her shadow, you want to keep the focus on Elphaba and Glinda, and also to mirror the choices made by the Broadway musical. Here, I think it's a mistake, because, a lot of people are coming into this not being familiar with the Broadway musical and only knowing the 1939 film. And also, not only for that, but I think for a more thematic reason. And that's that, as I said, this is now, and particularly in the second half, a story about feminism. And to see these women pitted against each other, not just Elphaba and Glinda, but you realize Dorothy as well. So for Dorothy to go after Elphaba with such zeal, without ever checking in with Elphaba, being like, just to cross my T's and dot my I's, What's your side of the story, Elphaba? You know, and that just speaks, I think, to Dorothy's immaturity, which is understandable. She's a child, basically. So I guess it really kind of falls on Elphaba to try and fix that. But we all have our childish moments, even as adults. Being emotionally mature, you don't know when that's going to happen. Sometimes it never happens. But I would have liked to have explored that. I've explored the wizard using this teenager against these two grown women. Because a teenage girl doesn't understand the complexities of womanhood like an adult woman does. Darn it! Okay. I think it would have been really nice to include Dorothy in that conversation. I know the goal here, of course, is to show a different perspective of what happened in this very famous story. But I often felt as a result that I wasn't getting the whole story. And that kind of made me feel like the whole story was at an arm's length away. And that to me didn't totally work. So also, because there were so many reprises and stuff like that, sometimes songs would start and it would feel like you missed the opening of the song. You're like, oh, wait, are we doing a musical number? But the truth was, a lot of the times we didn't do a musical number. You know, with the exception of Wonderful, it doesn't feel like the second half has big musical numbers like the first one did. I would categorize Wicked for Good as not having any musical numbers, you know, the way it came across to me. But it does have songs. So let's talk about those songs. By far and away, my favorite song is The Wizard's Wonderful. That was great. A fully produced production number. So I guess it has one musical number. And a really powerful song, particularly again today, about being a con man on a very high level. I mean, it was really the lyrics. I hope everybody pays attention to what the wizard is saying here. The candor about the song and the way being, you know, conning people works. It was a good song. And I thought it was very, you know, really great message. Very, very well done. And also to some degree, it's a business song. And, you know, I like talking about business. You know, it also, when I was watching the whole movie, with that as like a springboard, it made me think. And I was like, it doesn't matter how often you repeat a lie, it doesn't make it true. But then I was like, and this was a very sobering realization, if enough people believe a lie, does that suddenly make it true? How sad, but how true. And that's the kind of movie this sequel is. It has those kinds of thoughts. There was one great line where the wizard is like, I know, if you want to know a lot of lies about the past, and where I come from, they call it history. And, you know, of course, it's not as simple as that. But it's not totally wrong either. I mean, I thought that was really fascinating. I really liked that song. It was a little bit almost like We Didn't Start the Fire in terms of just like universal truth in your face. All right. So I also like Glinda's new song, The Girl in the Bubble. Very sad. And not particularly catchy, right? Like, I think I liked what it meant for the character and within the context of the film. It's not a song where I'm like, play it again. But I thought it was really good and very relatable to type A personalities. As for Elphaba's new song, it started so slowly and kind of creeps up on you that I didn't even realize we were in the middle of a new song, Elphaba's new song, until it was almost over. And also, to be fair, I was super distracted by the intricate set design for this song. The set design is incredible. I mean, like, again, when you say like they don't make them like they used to, this calls to mind the beautiful, intricate sets of like the heyday of the movie musical. And it's just beautiful. But in this case, it was a little distracting. And I would say that Elphaba's world overall, while I do think it reflects her, I think it has the same problem that her characterization has, is that it's a little too busy. And so it's hard to direct the audience's focus for a lot of her scenes, you know? Elphaba should have taken a marketing course at Shiz, and maybe her crusade against the wizard would have gone a little bit better if she'd learned some marketing lessons. But she was true to herself, which I think is really valuable. And some people will feel that she's perfect. You know, again, it depends on who you relate to. I know that No Good Deed and For Good are incredibly iconic songs at this point. And I must say, For Good is a beautiful song, you know, and the sentiment behind it is just really wonderful. Everybody's saying this movie will change them for good. And it's, it's very fun to say. And I think it's very true. But within the film, I didn't really particularly care for either of these musical numbers. I thought they were poorly staged. I think that was the biggest thing that I didn't like about them. And I thought that the sets that they took place on were rather bland and not as interesting. They just weren't as interesting as a lot of the musical numbers from the first movie. And just neither one of them came to life for me. Like, there's no song, I'm sorry to say, in the second half that, to me, matches Defying Gravity, one of the most amazing experiences of my life when it comes to entertainment. What Is This Feeling, which I listen to all the time. Dancing Through Life, Popular. I mean, these were incredible songs that were wonderfully choreographed and filmed. They just came together beautifully. And I just didn't see that here. I feel like the second film is more for the musical theater fans, whereas the first film was, I think, made to appeal beyond that to a more broader mainstream audience. I'm sorry, that's just how I feel. I'm sorry. I saw the first Wicked film 3 times in theaters, and each time I was so excited to see it again. It was a thrill from the very first shot. But this one's different. This is, the first movie is about all the fun of being a girl, right? And the second one is all the pain. And it's hard to look at that, to experience that. But I think I would like to, at some point, revisit it, because I do want to dive deeper into the film's messages. They're really very powerful. So as I said, these are some sobering truths. All right, so as I said, fascism and feminism. One scene that really struck me was Glinda and Firo's wedding, which just seems surreal when you realize what else is happening in that castle. No spoilers. It almost felt sometimes like you were watching a musical set during the fall of the Third Reich, which would sometimes make the lighter candy-colored tone of this movie feel like not just jarring, but perhaps not enough, to put it delicately. But then I guess that's the point, that even in a magical fantasy world where everything seems perfect, truly horrific things can happen. Multiple times during this movie, I was absolutely horrified by what I was witnessing. For instance, Ethan Slater's Bach. What a horrifying thing that happened to him. And the men in Wicked certainly don't handle themselves well, but besides the wizard, I think that they didn't really deserve what happened to them. It was just so sad. As for feminism, it's often said that while, of course, it's the dream for a woman to have it all, success in her personal and her professional life, it's not realistic that you can have both. And that is, I think, to this day, one of the most difficult things that women, and maybe men, I don't know, I mean, the world's changing, but that women have really struggled with. It's just been, speaking of The Sound of Music, climb any mountain, it's this mountain that women are trying to climb. And then to have this musical, this fantasy, come in and say, it's true, you can't have both. You have to choose. And to do it in such a poignant way, and to really force you to, you'll know in your heart, you'll emotionally gravitate towards one of the endings. And that's really hard because it means that you probably can't have the other one. And that's really, really hard. It's again, as I said, it's everything that's complicated and painful and tragic and sad about being a woman. Glinda, for Ariana Grande, is truly the role of a lifetime. And I say that because I think so much of why the character has worked here like never before, with all due respect to the other actresses who've portrayed her, is because of Grande's choices. This is just like magic. Every once in a while, the right actor gets matched with the right role, and it just transcends other performances. It's just incredible. As for Cynthia Erivo, I kind of feel the second film lets her down. And I feel bad about that because I know how great the character is to everyone, but I know that she particularly is representative to a number of women. I just don't think she's as well defined as Grande's Glinda in the second film, and they seem less evenly matched here. I think in particular, this second film's script should have gone through 1 or 2 more rewrites with the directive of strengthening and focusing Elphaba's role. I've been like, you did a great job with Glinda, but you need to do more with Elphaba. I think that it's particularly sad because I connected with Elphaba so much in the Defying Gravity sequence. When she saw herself as a little girl as she was falling, that was incredible. And I don't think that this second film ever recreates that. I was surprised. I mean, she does get it on. I was surprised at how sexy, let's say, some of her scenes are with Fiyero. I was like, oh, I do believe there might be some children eventually in this theater. I think it's okay for kids. But it is pushing the boundaries, I think, of a PG-13, particularly like, it might be like a James Bond movie where it totally goes over their head until they're older and then they go, oh, maybe that's a good way to describe it. But I do believe I saw that in the past, the Broadway show and the first film had tried to not show that kind of stuff. But this movie's like, oh, we're doing it. And I hope that that's rewarding to the Elphaba and Fiyero fans out there. As for Jonathan Bailey and Ethan Slater, they do a very good job with complicated men. And speaking of hard truths, showing the reality of, guys dealing with their own very complicated feelings, yet at the same time not realizing how careless they're being with the feelings of the women in their lives and the other people in their lives. And they create a lot of problems, sometimes huge problems. But I'm glad to say that the roles, the way they're written and the performances are not at all cliche, but they're rich and nuanced. And you really understand where Fiyero and Bach are coming from, even if you don't think that they're making nobody's really making great choices, except for Elphaba. I don't think Elphaba did anything wrong. Poor Elphaba. All right, and Marissa Bode. What a performance. A twisted and ugly person. And Bode doesn't flinch from portraying that. That was great. Because I think you might be like, well, let's give her some redeeming qualities. And they were like, no, this woman's broken. Jeff Goldblum, he's fantastic with that musical number, but his character sort of fades away as the movie progresses. But I did love his last scene with Glinda, although largely for Glinda. And as for Michelle Yeoh, I thought her performance was kind of one note in the second film and almost at some points became a caricature. I didn't really like her performance, but her costumes were gorgeous. Bowen Yang has only a few lines, but he really makes them count. And in such a sad film, to have a little bit of a chuckle here and there was very welcome. So, I mean, that's probably why Glinda will keep him around going forward. She's like, I sure could use the laugh, man. You got to help lift my spirits. He was wonderful. I liked him better in the second film than the first film. And I was very impressed with Coleman Domingo. If I didn't know it was him, because they were forced to announce it because everyone was worried it might be James Corden, or Lin-Manuel Miranda, I wouldn't know it was Coleman Domingo. He did a wonderful, wonderful job. It's very small cameo, but he really was amazing. So as you might recall, Jon Chu said that he modeled the first film off of a superhero origin story, particularly the Defying Gravity sequence, where Elphaba, like many a superhero, first takes flight. And I thought that was very smart and incredibly effective. And I think that whole approach made the first film feel more cinematic, more Hollywood. Wicked for Good, though, falls back squarely into the world of musical theater, which I think will delight the core fandom for Wicked. But I don't think that it quite fulfills the promise of the first film. It does feel like a little bit of a step back. Just a little one, just a scooch, but a step back nonetheless. The first film to me seemed grander. And also on that note, while in the first film, the production design felt very much like a movie, and in parts still does here, a lot of the times, especially for For Good and No Good Deed, it felt more like we were on a stage with smaller, more intimate settings that also were less clearly defined and were, like, for instance, more abstract. And I just prefer the other approach. It's a matter of preference. And I liked the first film better for that. I mean, they're so different. It really is an act one and an act two. I don't know if you can split something into an act one and act two going forward. I think, I don't know. I'd be curious to see how you guys feel about this experiment. I think maybe they would have been better off just releasing a 4-hour movie. That's just my opinion on it. We'll see. So that's my non-spoiler review of Wicked for Good. And I will say that without a doubt, no matter your tastes, no matter which of the two you like better, as a set, Wicked and Wicked for Good have definitely made movie history. They have joined, as I said, the pop culture pantheon. They're probably getting a theme park. They're going to be up there with Marvel and Star Wars and DC and Harry Potter. And I just think that's so wonderful and so exciting. And to have something new, we've had all this old IP that that many studios just keep regurgitating, and to have something new created and to reach that level is just, I think, very exciting, for fandom and storytelling and for the industry. And also to rip the musical fantasy out of Disney's iron grip and to allow others to be able to play in that space is also no small feat. So that's my, again, non-spoiler review of Wicked for Good. Share your thoughts down below. Be sure to subscribe. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.